This is the U.S. intelligence agency, mind control.
All right, let's fucking go. Why is communism even worse than fascism?
It's not.
Even worse than fascism. I'm aware that if you follow our channel, you understand nuance and complexity. But sadly, not everyone does.
You
In view of
understand
this,
being
I have to make
gaslit.
this disclaimer for those who will inevitably attempt to misrepresent what I'm saying in the future.
Here we
Nothing
go.
I'm
That's
about to
us.
say is intended to serve as a defense of fascism.
Uh-huh.
Arguing about whether fascism is better than communism is like fighting over
If you gotta say it, you're probably doing it.
your preferred flavor of gangrene. I merely ask that those of you who abhor fascism as much as I do are also willing to be intellectually honest and recognize the fact that communism is in fact even worse. I met a Bulgarian man in an Amsterdam cafe earlier this week. He recognized me and we talked about many things.
Never
he asked me
happened.
if I'd seen Chernobyl, the HBO miniseries, and I said no, because I hate watching
Whoa.
stuff everyone's banging on about.
You're
Jesus
about to talk
Christ.
about how a guy in Eastern Europe in the Balkans probably told you a story about how communism was really bad to live under from Bulgaria. Wow.
Crazy.
Talk to a Holocaust survivor.
I know what you mean, but you must watch it because it perfectly captures the society we lived in, where
Yes.
fear
Great
and
show.
cowardice triumphs over truth. I watched Chernobyl the day I got home, and he's right. The series is so authentic, it immediately hits you in the gut when you recognize it.
Yeah.
But he also told me a fascinating story about his country that I was not aware of. The man who eventually became the first president of
Have you seen
Bulgaria when the
Schindler's List?
USSR
Let me tell
collapsed.
you, a movie that hits you in the gut.
I actually haven't.
Oh, you haven't?
No.
There's only one thing in there that people don't like. It's like Holocaust historians don't like.
Sure.
It's the shower scene because
Okay.
they do this I don't remember exactly their problem with it, but they say that it has put an image in people's minds of how the gas chambers worked.
Okay.
And which then is not what's represented at Auschwitz or something like that.
Okay, interesting.
They do a weird a pointless scene where they load all the people into showers and they think that they're going to be killed, and then it's just regular showers. So they don't like that it plays up this whole thing that actually did happen to people for that
like
moment
a
or
a
something.
torture thing. It's like
Yeah,
mock
yeah,
mock execution, and
yeah,
then they actually
yeah, and
do it. Yeah.
that type of shit didn't happen. They just killed them.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So I
Yeah.
think
Well,
that's
why would they do mock
and they say
execution?
other than that, it's perfectly accurate.
Yeah.
Zheluzhelev was a dissident during Soviet times. He was expelled from the
You know how many
Communist
people
Party
died on the
and
train
made
just getting there to the camps?
Probably a lot.
Because there was no heat or air conditioning, and they're packed on them like slave ships.
Yes. Yeah, I'm not surprised at all.
And it took days to get to the camps.
Deployable for years. Eventually, in 1982, he wrote a book called Fascism, in which he chronicled the fascist regimes in Spain, Italy, and Germany before, during, and after World War II.
Okay.
Was this a ploy to curry favor with the Communist Party by criticizing its
Okay,
enemies?
hang
Exactly.
on. Okay. Now we're talking about something else here. Because if you're talking about communism worse than fascism, you can say specific cases of fascism which lean more towards on the nationalist side were better than Joseph Stalin or Pol Pot, but also in the entire sphere of communism, Uncle Ho, based as fuck, there's plenty of fine communists,
Yeah.
There's no good fascists. There's no good fascists. So it's yes, we can get niche and say, oh, this maybe we could say Franco is better than Stalin.
Maybe.
Orwell hated both, so
Yeah.
The book was banned within weeks of publication because the similarities between the societies he described in the book and the one he lived in were far too striking to ignore. The parallels between these two collectivist ideologies are, of course, exceedingly obvious. Spawned during the same time period as a response to the same problem, and offering many of the same solutions, communists and fascists had stark differences, but on economics in particular, Hitler's National Socialists were not as different to other kinds of socialists as people would like to believe.
Shut
The
up.
reasons for this historical revisionism differ from country to country.
It's easier to
In
do
Russia,
this
where
with.
I come from,
It's so much easier to do this with Mussolini because he was a syndicalist.
Yes. Yeah. It really is. People don't realize how easy it is. Also, he was kind of a pussy. Like, he was kind of a bitch. They kind of just wanted to look the part, but didn't really want to do.
I love that. I love that he carried a little staff around, and then when he gets shot in the fucking head, you can see him dead with the staff in his
He's
hand.
clutching it, isn't he?
Yeah. But like with Hitler, again, third way. That's what it's called.
Mm.
It is not capitalism, socialism, communism. It is the third way. It is.
Yeah.
The,
It's its own thing.
Do you know the Russians call him something else that's really interesting? And I was watching a
Oh, really?
documentary. I was watching a documentary, and it was a Russian documentary on like one of their spies, like in Germany, and it was basically like the
Okay.
spy who like James Bond is something like that. Spy who James Bond was
Okay.
based off. So title like something like that. But because it was like translated into English, they used the Soviet or the Russian acronym to refer to the Nazi Party. And it was the only time I've ever heard it. And we were like, what are they saying? And I was like, oh, they're talking about the Nazis. Soviet people seldom use the term Nazi, in part because the Communist Party wanted to distance its project from the National Socialists, the Third Reich. So they use the word fascist more.
Interesting.
But this doesn't have the acronym here. Just keep playing. I'll let you know if I find it.
Okay.
a law passed in 2014 criminalized any meaningful comparison between the crimes of the Soviet Union and the exact same crimes committed by Nazi Germany. As a result, most people in Russia, and frankly elsewhere, have no idea that when Hitler started World War II by invading Poland, he wasn't alone. The Soviet Union invaded Poland at exactly the same time, capturing...
Guys, he invaded Czechoslovakia first, didn't he? Guys?
Yeah.
And I think Poland also went, ooh, don't mind if we do, and took a piece of Czechoslovakia as well.
You might have to fact check that one.
More territory than the Germans. This was the product of an
so did Bulgaria, I think.
secret agreement between Hitler and Stalin, in which they divided Eastern Europe as they saw fit, something called the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. Ironically, in Russia, which experienced communism firsthand, the comparison between communism and fascism is not banned in order to defend the ideology of communism, merely to protect the historical view of Russians as a good people who sacrificed millions of lives to stop Hitler, which is of course true. In the West, on the other hand, communism apologists operate from a rather different set of needs. First, despite
NSDAP, National Socialist German Workers' Party, but that's the German acronym for it.
Cool.
Anyway,
that's interesting.
The devil's alliance between Nazi Germany and the USSR, Hitler soon stabbed his new friend in the back, and by June 1941, having been invaded, the Soviets found themselves on the same side as Britain and France, fighting Germany. Orwell's magnificent preface to Animal
Well, that's what Stalin gets for making a deal with a fascist.
Farm makes clear the corrosive effect this necessary alliance had on the West's ability to criticize communism. You may be familiar with the following Orwell quote. I'm well acquainted with all the arguments against freedom of thought.
How isn't it crazy
that
how crazy good this list was irrigated? Remember how I told you the reason why I have a problem with Orwell? Remember this conversation, Jack? Isn't it amazing?
Yeah. It's
we
hilarious.
hit them all. We hit them all.
These are randomly picked videos, and they've got linked elements towards all of them. It's great.
I already brought them
up too. I answer simply that they don't convince me, and that our civilization over a period
you guys know
of
he's a socialist, right?
Has been founded on the opposite notice. What you likely aren't familiar with is the sentence that followed it, which was, for quite a decade past, I have believed that the existing Russian regime is a mainly evil thing, and I claim the right to say so, in spite of the fact that we are allies with the USSR in a war which I want to see won. The argument for preventing this sort of sentiment from being aired was simple. We needed the Soviet Union to win.
Full stop. Hang on. Guys, you have to take in mind the context that was going on here, okay? This man fought a fascist enemy, and Stalin betrayed his people. He saw the tankies for what they were back then, and when the war got to this phase, when Stalin had to be an ally with the British, there was a massive British propaganda campaign to humanize Stalin and to show Stalin as a good guy. and they spent a lot of money to do this. And Orwell was the guy who was there being like, no, he's not.
Yeah, and it's also because that Stalin was also funding the communists in the Civil War, and what happened is basically Orwell saw that whole they were denying the crimes of their side and amplifying the crimes of the fascists, and
We
that
literally
was
saw
something
that
disgusted him.
from anarchists right after crying about the drone drop video, where they were saying that it was based, or that they dug up corpses because the Catholic Church also did crimes.
But that's realistically where his opposition came from. Also, the fact that the Soviet Union was a top-down authoritarian socialist state.
Yeah, so he's trying to twist Orwell here, to use Orwell in an argument to condemn communism, because Joseph Stalin was in competition with Pol Pot. In my opinion, you'd probably say Mao, but in competition with the worst communist ever to exist.
Yes. Yeah, and that's the egregious thing here, because Orwell's not the worst source to bring up, but you also need to understand where he's coming from and why
They
he
don't
has
though.
these
They
opinions.
twist
They
1984 to their
never
own
do.
agenda.
Yeah,
It's so
they
weird.
never understand. And to understand 1984 in the context that it was written, you need to understand Orwell as a person. And they never understand Orwell as a person.
Guess what? Guess what else you need for that?
Go on. A brain?
Karl Marx. You also need to understand the time and the
Yeah.
period it was written in.
Yes.
Stalin's critics was a price worth paying. In other words, some whitewashing of communist crimes is a product of practical considerations, but not all. There were, and I can tell you from direct personal experience, still are many people in Western societies who are temperamentally inclined towards the allure of radical socialism. As they see the negative trade-offs of capitalism, their instincts for compassion, empathy, and care
Antithesis.
The thing is that they could also just be like, they're so desperate to show that Hitler wasn't a capitalist, to amplify the socialist elements. They can't be like, it was both. And then there's Gaddafi.
Yeah. It's because they're dumb. They don't understand. It's the same reason that they can't use Orwell correctly.
Into overdrive, combined with an idealism which blinds them to the sad truth of life that any society will always have unsolvable problems. They see only the flaws in their own and assume that the opposite must be better. George Bernard Shaw, for example, loved communism and worshipped Stalin. Walter Duranty of the New York Times won a Pulitzer Prize for his fraudulent coverage of the Holodomor and widespread famine in the Soviet Union, in which millions starved to death, including members of my own family. I won't waste your time with more examples. We all know some on the left cover for communism because they believe in it or want to believe it.
So communism hurt you
hasn't been
personally.
tried
That's
properly.
okay, bro.
No.
You're allowed to say it. Like, it's fine. The Bulgarian guy's allowed to say it too, but
Yep.
you know,
I mean, that's a valid reason to hate it. I would say anyway.
Like, okay, you can say communism is worse than fascism, but don't act like it was worse. Don't act like that famine, the deliberately induced famine, genocide was worse than the Holocaust. We don't need to have a suffering Olympics either.
No,
Right?
no,
The Holocaust
absolutely.
set a precedent.
Yep, and that's then, yeah, having the comparison wars just hurts everybody involved. It's silly.
Nor will I give you the standard anti-communist talking points about the death toll from communist regimes, which far exceeds those of any other ideology. I want to remind you that Che Guevara, whose face is an ever-present symbol of resistance around the world.
And
I have a Che shirt.
would you believe it? You know who I think is better than Che? Ahmed Shah Massoud, also a war criminal. You know, the forces that weren't directly under his control also committed genocide. You know,
Yeah, you've seen my Che shirt, haven't you?
Yeah, isn't it a Crowder shirt or something?
One.
I have Cuban family, and so like it like really bothers them that like young people do the Che thing.
Oh, I bet.
I
bet it does.
I could care less.
It is what it is.
It's better. It's better than wearing Hitler as a shirt. You know,
that's true. Or being a dude who thinks he's Hitler resurrected. Have you seen that guy?
Yes.
He wears a nose ring.
He just wants attention.
It's
the nose
funny.
ring to replace the. It's very. He just wants attention. Don't give it to him.
was in fact nothing more than a racist, homophobic mass murderer. Above
That's
and
true.
beyond these very
Hang
real
on,
atrocities,
hang
the
on,
true
hang
horror of
on, hang on. We're setting the bar real low if we're just saying he was a racist, homophobic mass murderer. This is the whole thing. It's like, did you know that the communists hated gay people? Whoa, how were they treated in the rest of the world at the time?
My favorite one is when they bring up
How
the
did
World War II
Reagan? How did
soldiers.
Reagan treat him, guys?
My
How was the
favorite is
AIDS
the World War
crisis?
II soldiers, where they're like, "Oh, these guys, the real anti-fascists." I'm like, my man, my dude, do you understand what people were like at this time?
the communist system was something that went beyond its material impact. As my newly made Bulgarian friend told me, Bulgaria has a difficult history, he said, constantly invaded, occupied by the Ottomans for centuries, and we always bounced back.
This is the
but
most
we still
Bulgarian
haven't
shit I've
recovered
ever
from
heard.
communism. Why? Because while fascism is nationalistic, totalitarian, and collectivist, it does not aspire to dominate the lives of ordinary citizens to anything like the same extent. Communism, remember,
Excuse me?
rejected the idea of
No,
private
see,
property,
no, you don't
private
understand.
enterprise.
As long as you're in the fascist class, then it's everyone else, right? Communism, it's
Right,
only
because
Stalin.
if you're the chosen race, you are
Yeah, then you get rights.
you don't have anything
You get
affected to. Yeah, none of your life is affected. But if you're not, oh boy, you better watch out.
Mhm.
Certainly sounds like a definitely not fascist country that
Sounds like
definitely
freedom
isn't
to me.
communist.
Eagle screech, but it's actually a hawk.
Or indeed a private life of any kind. In the Soviet Union, you were explicitly told to put the interests of the state above not only your own, but those of your loved ones. If you read my book, An Immigrant's Love Letter to the West, you'll
Nope.
remember the story of Pavlik
Nope.
Morozov, a boy who reported his own father to the authorities and was held up as a national hero. Fascism was almost as evil as communism, to be sure, but it did not attempt to achieve its aims by stealing and redistributing private property, seizing your business, or installing a new tyrannical hierarchy under the pretense of eradicating it. The fear and deceit you see depicted so accurately in the Chernobyl miniseries is a product of a society
Oh, yeah,
that has
it's about
fundamentally
this.
broken the will of its own people. The drive to better your own life, to see your children prosper and thrive, to create and build things worthy of notice and admiration. All of these were beaten, starved, and tortured out of the people who had the misfortune to live under communist regimes. So yes, communist societies
Okay.
did kill, starve, rape,
So
and
his
torture more
his
people.
point is that communism oppressed everyone equally, but fascism only oppressed certain people a lot. I think that's
And that's better.
yeah. As long as
Apparently.
it's not the chosen white people, I agree with it. Is
Mhm.
that what we're coming with?
That's pretty much what I'm getting.
And he's Ukrainian. Okay, so
That's what it seems like, yeah.
okay,
People than the fascist. But
he's
they
allowed
also
to
engaged
then.
in the totalitarianism of the mind, of the kind that not even Hitler aspired to. It is for this reason, above all others, that those of us who lived under communism, or come from families that did, reject so strongly the
Have
modern
you lived
trend
under
in which
fascism too?
ideology is elevated above truth.
I don't
Do you
know.
think?
You
Do you
guys
think
lived under Donald Trump.
I mean, I'm just saying. It's like it's one of those things where I was like, oh, you lived under communism, okay, bro. It's
Mm.
like we don't need to. I don't need to have a debate. It's like debating people from Afghanistan about like certain
Yeah.
jihadist leaders. I like. It's just not productive.
No.
Political correctness is prioritized over facts, and the powers that be increasingly seek to control not only what we do, but also what we think.
Hmm.
Okay.
Well, I think
was
it's
kind of
totally fine for people to tell you that you're a fascist for saying communism is worse, and that's just something you have to deal with if you,
I think
like, we
so.
get it. You were personally hurt by it.